Next In.
Welcome to Nxt In. Today, I've got a special surprise where we've got George from Movio.AI, and I'm going to butcher the name of the studio, the name of the company. It's got some Latin flair in it that I am not adept to pronounce. So, George, introduce yourself and then correct my inability to actually pronounce this correctly.
No, actually, Shane, it's actually pretty good. I'm George. The name is pronounced Moveo. I mean, it's kind of, I think it's Latin. It actually stands for, moving forward, which I think is a cool thing. It took us, to be honest with you, it took us, I don't know, like 4 months to come up with a company name because, all the domains have been taken, all the cool ones at least. So
and you're like, we're an AI company, we're moving forward. Let's go down to our roots, which Latin is clearly the roots of all things. And let's get down to the basics.
Yeah, I mean, Greek is the root to all things. I'm Greek. And then Latin, of course.
Yeah, that sounds like that could start a battle real fast with a wide range of people.
Yeah, exactly.
So you're coming from Greece today.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm actually right now. I'm in Athens, Greece, in our offices. Our team, we're an AI company basically. We were founded 3 years ago, approximately, during COVID. So we're a COVID company.
COVID baby startup.
COVID baby. So yeah, I mean, if you think about that, a startup is kind of like your baby. So it's our COVID baby.
Yeah. COVID baby moving forward. I get it. That makes sense. COVID baby, we're all moving forward. And
exactly.
there's a lot of different angles that come into that on how that name was started. So what I want to start with, George, before we get into the nitty-gritties of your company, what you guys are building, how you guys are building it, I want to go back to learning a little bit about you. Like, where did you come from? Because you're one of the co-founders and the chief of AI. So I want to get an understanding as like, how did we get there?
Right. So, I mean, my story is not super interesting. I grew up in Athens, Greece. I went here, I went to school here. And then I decided to actually go study in the US when I was 18. I went to study at UC Santa Cruz in California, North California. I did my undergrad in basically computer science. And then I decided to go directly to do a PhD at Cornell University, where I was mostly specializing in natural language processing and databases. And 2 years into my PhD, I decided, it was like COVID happened, everything was disrupted. Even if you wanted not to get disrupted, your life, was upside down. So basically what happened is I moved from Ithaca, where I was staying at the Ithaca campus. And then I moved to Boston with my brother. My brother at the time was working at IBM, Watson.
Okay.
So we moved basically together in his apartment during COVID. And we had a lot of time, Shane, we had a lot of time to think, a lot of time to think what are we going to do with our lives. To be honest with you, I wasn't super happy with my PhD. I was a little bit let down with academia and how it's been set up. The whole publish or perish kind of mentality was getting a bit on my nerves. So I wasn't entirely happy. My brother also at IBM, we wanted to do basically something with our expertise. My brother was also background on natural language processing. So basically, we decided to launch Moveo after a while. And we decided to take a big leap of faith. And both of us quit their jobs, basically. I quit Cornell, Panos quit IBM. And we actually, believe it or not, we moved back to Greece, back to our, childhood bedrooms, literally, okay, having income going back to zero income, $0. Okay, this is big, and we decided to bootstrap Moveo basically. And now, 3 years later, we are, approximately 25 to 30 people. Our team is split between Athens, New York, and Sao Paulo, Brazil. We have a platform where we have a good technology. We're serving 2.5 million users per month in 19 languages, coming from 85 different countries. So, the bet, I mean, it hasn't paid off yet. We have a lot of things to do yet still, but it wasn't done.
But you're moving forward. But you're moving
Exactly.
forward, and it sounds like you're moving forward in a really positive way. Where I
Exactly.
mean, a million daily active users,
Two and a
monthly,
half. Yeah.
two
Two
and
and
a
a half.
half daily
Yeah.
active.
So
What does your monthly user base look like?
I haven't told you what we do basically. So
No,
let me do this first. So basically, we are a SaaS company. We are B2B, where we have a platform for companies to create AI virtual agents from their own data. So the 2.5 comes from the end users that are actually talking to the chatbots of our customers, basically.
gotcha.
But yeah, I mean,
What does that typical customer look like for you guys?
the ideal customer.
Yeah, like the typical customer. Yeah,
Right. Yeah, the typical customer is a company that wants to automate customer service, basically. So they have a relatively big volume of incoming requests that they cannot really handle in their customer service department, and they want to automate it and at the same time, improve customer experience. We have customers that are actually, in fields like e-commerce or game tech or financial services, where the differentiation between companies, between
yeah.
competitors, is very minimal. But
That's
as I
interesting,
said,
and you guys are in a spot like in Greece. Greece, one of the largest employment sectors in Greece is customer service, right? I know like
yeah,
Dropbox has a huge campus out in Greece specifically for their customer service sector, and I know that they were wanting to do something. I don't know if they're using you or not, but I know that they were trying to get AI chatbots at Dropbox when they were a customer of mine for a while, and we were helping them build out some chatbot functions, and I think that project got killed. So build versus buy, I have to assume someone's picking that up. And
yeah,
you
I
guys are
mean,
prime in the location where
yeah, all
customer
right,
service exists.
right. They have to talk to us. I didn't know that. Okay.
Well, now you know. So
Right.
Dropbox, hit up George because I know that you guys were struggling 4 years ago. Maybe you figured it out, maybe you haven't. But
Yeah, and the technology is completely different today too. So some of the promises are finally being realized.
so let's
Like,
let's think about that though, because more or less, like, did you have software engineering experience prior to finding this company? Like, what did that look like for you? I know that you had mentioned your brother was at IBM. What did you do prior?
prior, I was mostly a student, so I mostly had academic experience from Cornell. I also did a few internships in between, like mostly in the summers, both in the US and in Greece. So my software engineering skills were not stellar, but my skills were good. My brother had a better background on engineering skills, so I learned quite fast, I would say. But it's a good question that you ask, because there's a vast difference between academic skills and software engineering skills. 100%.
What do you feel like was the kind of biggest learning curve, biggest juggle there to get things ramped up?
Yeah, I think, and it's kind of funny. It's one of the reasons that I didn't like my PhD, was that it was not like, at least my experience, not everybody's experience, but my experience was that it was not entirely practical. So the biggest difference is, in your academic experience, you don't care. Like a model is 80 gigabytes, and you need 5 GPUs to train it, and $500,000. You don't care. If you have the grants, you don't care. But if you're in a company, every byte matters, because every byte translates to dollars. So
So you're
this is
like, how can we create models that are sophisticated enough to figure out the feature that we want to create, but simple enough to where accuracy could be 93% or 91% or 90% or whatever we believe needs to be that percentage. And we have to make sacrifices, and we have to think about what are the edge cases on what things we're willing to make sacrifices on versus what actually gets productionized and deployed. So how did you start learning how to balance that?
Listen, it was a hard thing to do, and as you said, the magic word here is production machine learning code. This is very different than academic. Like I see academic repositories on GitHub, and I want to throw up. They're horrible, really. So my brother helped there a lot from his experience in production environments. I mean, he was working at IBM Watson, which is one of the good labs out there,
Yep.
and they were following best practices. So he helped like immensely, I would say. So I had him to like guide me, so to speak.
Okay. So, I wanted to take another step back, which is like, again, you and your brother, obviously very entrepreneurial. You dropped out of Cornell and you're like, I'm betting on myself. We're moving forward. Like, did you have somebody that was like a role model or an influential mentor, like somebody that was just like, take a bet on yourself? Like who was the role model? Because I know that there's a lot of people out there. There's probably people that are going to be listening today. If you're one of those people, comment below. But like, I have to imagine that there are people today that want to take a leap on themselves, just like you, but they might go, I don't have the credentials. All I have is academic experience. All I have is, enter in a million excuses, because there's always a million excuses to why you can't or won't do, like, bet on yourself. So I want to just know, like, how did you bet on yourself? Who was the mentor that got you in that mental space where you're like, yep, ready to go, if there even was a mentor?
Right. So exactly, it's a very hard decision. Okay, like dropping out of Cornell, or I mean, I could have dropped out of Cornell and had gone to Amazon or like Google or anybody. Okay, I could have gone there, earned like a lot of money. I could have done that, and I'm still thinking about it sometimes. Some rough nights, I'm still thinking about it because really, like when you start something on your own, that's it. There's now nobody else to do something if you don't do it. So it's a really hard decision, and it's not for everybody. Seriously, if you don't feel like taking this immense responsibility, maybe don't do it, or don't do it now. I feel though the younger you are, the less risk there is, or you feel at least less exposed. So I feel that I just have myself to maintain. I don't have kids, I don't have anybody else. So for me, it was rather easy, I would say. But like my mentor, I would have to say that I've drawn inspiration from my father because he's also an entrepreneur. He founded his own company. He also quit his job like back in the day to start his own company, and he succeeded actually. He basically did it in Athens, and he managed to put his company in the stock market here in Athens, which is a big thing. Okay, so I drew inspiration from that for sure. But also like having a co-founder, I think makes things very much easier. That's been my experience, at least so far.
Yeah. And you've got a few years of figuring out how to trust your co-founder is what it sounds like. So that's helpful as well, right?
Yeah. For me, it was my brother. So there's blind trust there, as you can imagine. But yeah, I mean, if you start a company with somebody, you get into a marriage. So seriously, you shouldn't have any second thoughts, because you have so many problems to solve. If you have a big obstacle, which is a layer of trust between your co-founder, it's not going to work.
Nope. Experienced that one. This is my Next Level is my fifth company, and I definitely had two that failed, literally just because me and my co-founders were favorite. Like, we loved each other and we thought we were awesome. Like, in terms of friendship, we'll go out, grab a beer, we'll smash some Jaeger bombs, whatever we need to do. Like, we'll have a good time, right? But when it came down to business, it's like, if you don't see eye to eye, it's a fail 10 out of 10 times, 20 out of 10 times.
Right.
So one of the things that I want to get into a little bit is like when I think about what you can do and what you can achieve in AI and where you apply your time when it comes to like continuous learning, right? So I talk to a lot of people that they might be on the production side, they might be on the modeling side, they might be somewhere in a blend in between. They're always looking for like, where do I spend my time? Because you could spend a million years in all the white papers that might exist, and you might spend a million years identifying all the repositories with all of these open source packages that are a complete waste of time, right? So what I'm curious about, especially since like you need to be able to ship fast, deliver fast, you've got 2.5 million daily active users that you got to take care of, and you've got to be able to go, what features do we actually invest in? How do we productionize that and ship it? But to get there, we have to go, what do we need to learn? How do we need to learn it? So it's like the world, especially in AI, natural language processing, generative AI, all of these LLM libraries, like there's so many of them, and it feels like it's constantly changing every single day
Yeah,
with
exactly.
emerging technologies and honestly consumer behaviors. So between emerging technologies, consumer behaviors, what strategies or habits have you been able to implement, or your brother, that you've been able to adopt to get ahead of the curve? And what advice would you give newbies that are trying to do what you're doing, which is, I'm trying to learn in an ever evolving world, whether again, emerging technologies or consumer behaviors?
Right, exactly. So it's something that is actually easier said than done. Follow all the advancements and stuff. I think that since the release of ChatGPT, it's been crazy. Okay, the developments, like you see new stuff coming out seriously like every week. It's really hard to keep up with all the progress because the whole community is working on things like serving LLMs or fine-tuning LLMs, or how do you actually make them scale, things like that. So it's really been hard. Okay, and as a founder having other things to do at the same time, I think that if you ask me as a founder, I'll give you a different answer than if you ask me as a software engineer or as a machine learning engineer in a company.
Okay.
If you ask me as a founder, I feel that you have to take a step back a little bit from the nitty gritty of implementation and then the nitty gritty of models and accuracy and precision and recall and F1 and scalability and throughput and latency. And, take a step back, okay? Because it's not about features so much. It's not about what you're gonna do next. Is like seeing the whole picture and be like, start from the customer experience first. This is what Steve Jobs was saying, and many people quote him. Of course, it's Steve Jobs, but he's right. You have to start like how your customer is gonna use your technology and work backwards to build the technology itself, not build the next amazing feature that us five are really pumped because we're engineers. Of course we're pumped. Okay, we're gonna build this, and then nobody uses it. It's a waste
I
of time. I've learned this the hard way, I'm telling you.
Yeah, I've heard that one a lot, and I would love to know how you learned the hard way, because I want to dive into that a little bit. But like one of the things that I've heard a lot from a lot of different founders, and I'll say from one of my startups in the past, which is a machine learning and artificial intelligence platform that did identity resolution. One of the things that I recognized was I had a co-founder that was like the smartest guy on the planet. The guy was a freaking genius, and he wanted his model to be the best model, like back-end services up the freaking yin yang. Like that is what we wanted to live for and breathe for and everything else. So it's like my stuff works, and it works really well, but compromised user experience. So while the model worked really well, the functionality and the ability to use it and to think about who that consumer was mismatched, right? Like the end consumer was someone different than who was being built for. And so the adoption rate was really low, right?
Exactly.
So I don't know what your experience was like, but I know that for ours, it was like we were building for the wrong persona that was using the tool. And because we were building the tool for one persona when really the person that was using it was totally different, the way that they thought and the way that they were thinking about using it and applying their methodologies and their services to augment what they wanted as a service was very different. So the user experience ultimately made that company fall, and it just crashed.
Right. No, this is true. And like when we first started Moveo, we started with our NLU classifier. Okay, we wanted to build the best classifier. Like, oh, we want to have bigger accuracy and precision and recall than, like Google, Microsoft, Louis, like Rasa, and we did that. Okay, like for several like benchmarks, we have higher accuracy and F1 scores, let's say, than Google Dialogflow and Microsoft Louis and Rasa. And like Google Dialogflow, they're probably a team of like 500 people, and we were like two guys, in an apartment.
You're like,
Like,
we won. Got it.
yeah, we're like,
Okay.
yeah, exactly. We're like, oh fuck, we won. We're gonna be the best. Nobody cares because customers do not understand it. They cannot understand what accuracy means. Like on a specific benchmark, Like, what is a benchmark? What do you mean? Like, they don't get it. They don't get
Matter of
it.
fact, if you try to explain it to them, it might scare them. Like it might just be
Yeah.
like, this seems
And they're very
risky.
skeptical. You're like, how are you better than Google? Like, but it doesn't matter at the end of the day. You have to look at it like in a big picture kind of way and be like, what is the customer experience? How easy is it for companies to actually build a virtual agent, even if it's not the best? This is what we're trying to optimize for right now. We're trying to optimize on like the return of investment. I mean, it's a beast. I mean, okay, as an engineer, I don't like those terms. Okay, I'm an engineer. ROI, I learned it like last year. Okay, but it's the reality, because when you talk to banks, you have to talk about ROI, not F1 score.
Yeah, it's kind of like the person that wants to brew beer in their garage, and they're like, I make the best beer on the planet, and they're like,
Yeah,
yeah, but like, how much does it cost to make that beer, and then how much is the consumer going to pay for it, and does that cost taste analysis go to
exactly,
market? And the answer
exactly,
might very well be no. I'm not paying $30 for one beer. Thanks, but no thanks. But you're like, but my beer is theoretically better than everyone else's, and it's
exactly.
like nobody cares.
Exactly. But as a founder, I've learned to think this way. Okay, not get into the nitty gritty. We have a whole team now that is also helping us. Is more responsible on the nitty gritty. I also write code a lot. I love writing code. I love doing development. We're like, I'm actually part of the development team of several of our generative AI stuff right now. So, I mean, I haven't let this go, but I've also learned to look at the big picture and start from the customer experience, basically.
So I want to talk about that a little bit, where it's like, let's go into a little bit of like hiring practices, and like when you're looking at, because you've interviewed people and your team is growing, and again, getting to 25 people in like in a 2-year time span, having 2.5 million daily active users is impressive. There's a lot of people that have gone out and tried to start their own company that have never reached that point. So
Yeah.
first of all, congrats, dude, because that's fucking awesome.
Thank
And
you. Thank
but
you.
what I really want to get into is like thinking about when you're hiring people, because you can interview, again, like we're talking about, is the best engineer on the planet that's working on R&D and white papers and all of those things at these really big companies, and they're not going to get what you get. They're not going to get the purpose, the why, the how. So when you're interviewing people, we're always trying to balance this difference between like a very deep technical knowledge versus a culture and product fit. So how do you balance, like how do you strike the balance between those two things when you're interviewing people?
Right. I think this one, the cultural fit is kind of like the hardest thing to get right, because it's a very soft skill. It's not like something that you can get out of a test, like out of a coding interview, let's say. So it's something that we're still struggling with. I mean, I probably don't have the best answer for this, but I've come to realize that getting somebody who's not a fit is catastrophic, and especially realizing 6 months later is the worst, because you've basically wasted 6 months. But what we try to do is, first of all, look at the experience of the person that we're trying to interview. If they've worked in a startup or in a small team, the chances are very high that they're going to be able to adapt. If they're coming from corporate roles, like in consulting and stuff like that, it's something that we really try to give questions like, have you worked in a small team? What has been your experience? Here, there's no concrete roles. We wear many hats. You may be asked to even do data annotation manually, and I don't care. You will do it, because we're like, everybody is a team player here. So I basically try to look at the person's personality and see if they don't have a big ego, mostly, because I want them to be team players and maybe do the shitty work as
Yeah,
well.
so it's like would they be willing to do data labeling and do hot dog no hot dog analysis?
Yes,
Like,
exactly.
hot
The
dog no
most
hot dog
important.
analysis. Are you willing to do it? Because if you're not, thanks but no thanks. Swipe left, move on. Because
Yeah,
at a startup, it's just like sometimes you don't have the resources to go. Yeah, we're going to go pay a team out in Tel Aviv or
exactly.
Argentina to go do all of our data labeling for $500,000. We don't have that. So
Exactly.
no hot dog. Hot dog is your responsibility today.
Yeah,
We all take turns once a
yeah,
week.
exactly. And like at Movio here, we have a culture. We are hustlers. Okay, we like this role. We're kind of a mafia. we do everything. Okay, I'll do it. I don't care. But you have to take this responsibility and you have to feel nice because you're helping the other person who's sitting next to you. And I feel that I'm trying to get this kind of vibe out of the interviewee.
Yeah. Yeah, I want to make like a lot of Spartan jokes where it's like,
Yeah.
just because you guys are out there, it's like Coliseum stuff. Like in my
Yeah,
head, I'm going to that route, but
yeah, exactly.
I too much Assassin's Creed, honestly.
Yeah.
But so I guess let me ask you this: like, have you ever had an opportunity? And the answer could be no, but have you ever had an opportunity to interview somebody where maybe they didn't match you technically, but they did something profound enough where you're like, yeah, I can pour my time, my energy, and a little bit of my soul into this person to up level them because they have like a unique fit in X, Y, and Z area. So is there, I'd love to hear a story of maybe like somebody that interviewed you in a profound, like you interviewed and in a profound way, they impressed you.
I'm trying to think off the top of my head. I have an incident. It's not on engineering. It's on marketing actually.
Okay.
But I think it's kind of like what you said in the sense that technically, okay. I mean, okay, you need to pass a threshold. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense. Okay, if you don't pass a threshold, we're not a university here. We cannot teach you, how to, I don't know how to breathe. Okay, you have to know how to breathe. So basically what I'm trying to say is that you have to know the basics. And a mistake that we made actually early on was to hire junior people. I mean, obviously we didn't have the capital too, so we had to play with the weapons that we had. But we hired a lot of junior people. We put the extra time to basically teach them, and now we're very happy, okay, because these guys had the correct mentality to work hard and learn things, and now they're like good members of our team. But the opposite has also happened, that we hired junior people. We were a larger team back then. We didn't have time to train them, and it was just disaster. But when it comes to people that don't have the amazing technical skills, but they really show that they really want to work in a startup that is innovating, learn new things, be part of a team, become part of the mafia. When I see that people get pumped with becoming part of the mafia, I also get pumped because I can kind of sense it sometimes that they're willing to go the extra mile.
How do you figure that out though? Like what are some of those green light triggers in the back of your head where you're like, yep, they're ready to join the mafia.
So
let's go. This is happening.
The moment I kind of I try to at least to feel it is when I talk to them about the vision of the company. When I talk to them a bit about the vision of the company and they look at me in the eye without looking anywhere else, I'm like, okay, this guy believes in the vision. He can believe that we can do great. So
they're not like remote interviewing like this, where they're like, oh yeah, that's cool, that's fun.
Yeah,
like that, where it's like you see the top of their head the entire time during the interview. It's like
exactly, I can also see their eyes widen. This is, I also get this kind of feedback, implicit feedback that they're going to believe in the vision because we're doing something very, very hard. Every startup is doing something very, very hard. So getting people here that do not believe in this in the vision and they're not willing to do this thing, which is almost impossible if you think about it. Even if you put it in terms of numbers, we're trying to beat the odds here. If people don't believe that we can beat the odds, then it doesn't make sense.
Because then they're just creating a self-fulfilling prophecy, bringing that into the culture of the company, where it's just like there's resistance, where it's just like we feel like we have a dragging weight. We're on sail, we're driving, but then we have an anchor that's driving behind. It's like that doesn't make sense. Release the anchor, let go of the anchor. Let's move forward.
Yeah, and something that a founder of a very big company told me recently is that, hey, you know what? If you hire somebody and you see that they're not motivated, like they're not super motivated, and you try to motivate them, he's basically like, don't try it. You cannot motivate them. That's it. They're like grown up people. You cannot just change their world mentality. So as you said, like it's very important to get this right before actually hiring, because this doesn't change. It's not that they're gonna come in the company, they're gonna see the product and the technology we're building, and all of a sudden they're going to be motivated. No.
A lot of people say they're most motivated at the conception of the idea, right? So like
Right.
they're most happy when there's this unknown entity where it's like, I'm inspired, I'm intrigued,
Right.
I'm ready to learn and grow. But like once they get into the weeds of stuff and they get into the product decisions, like there's a lot of frustrations, but hopefully their angle of frustration comes from a passion and a motivation for
Right.
driving something forward. And that can be grown over time because they could get more and more dedicated, where they become the rally cry and they become the George that goes, I see the spark. We connect. We see the spark. You're ready to join the mafia. Like
Exactly.
I conduct initiations now.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm telling you, this is something that is hard. It's hard to get right. Sometimes I feel that the person I'm talking to believes in the vision, and it ends up like I end up making a mistake. But I think this comes from experience. I mean, I don't know what to say there. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
you're like, I'm new still, so I've got a couple of years of making some mistakes. So you'll be forgiven.
Yeah, exactly.
You just got to forgive your future self. You're like, future self will know better. So
exactly. I mean, I'm looking at code that I wrote like 3 years ago, and I'm like, who wrote this horrible thing here? I mean,
you know what I classify that as, George? I classify that as your education investment that you pulled out from your PhD program.
Exactly.
That's what I tell myself all the time, because I dropped out my senior year in college and I never graduated. And
Wow.
one of the things that I always said to myself was, every time that I made a mistake and I overinvested in the wrong hire or the wrong product or the wrong solution, I was like, well, that goes to my education fund. Put that into the piggy bank.
Yeah, right, exactly. I want to listen to your story too. Like, how come you dropped out senior year? Like, you had like a few months left.
Yeah, so I actually that's a long story for me, but more or less what it came down to was I was running a residential house painting company, and I was helping expand that company, and I had moved up to Vancouver, BC, up in Canada, and we had scaled it up. So because it was residential house painting, there was a seasonality behind it, right? But between May and September, we'd have about 300 employees, and I had moved up to Canada while going to the University of Washington in the US. They VPNs, whatever. They found out that I was like living in Canada most of the time. And they were like, okay, well, you got to come back to the US. Otherwise, we're going to expel you, more or less. And I was like, all right, well, I don't need school, so I'm good. Like,
wow.
And
that was a bold move. Yeah.
So rather than moving back, it was one of those things where it was like, bet on myself, which the irony of that was I put all my money in the Canadian dollar right before the Canadian dollar tanked. And so technically overnight, I lost half of everything. And so I did bet on myself. I did make a mistake. I lost half of all my income. And then essentially I put, if it didn't fit my car, it got put on the side of the road, had a for free sign on it, took all my money out of the Canadian bank, came back to the US, went out to Hawaii. My family always jokes that I was like homeless in Hawaii for a bit while I was like soul searching. And one of the reasons why I actually got into recruiting was I was watching Friends with Benefits with Justin Timberlake and Mila Kunis. And she like recruited Justin Timberlake to leave his creative agency in LA to move to New York. And I was like, what? Someone gets paid to do that? I was like, I could do that. And then here I am. And now we recruit for software companies, machine learning companies. We've got legal, we've got video games, we've got a bunch of stuff. And it's been incredible and awesome. And my team kicks ass, and they've helped me win all of these awards that are back here. And I think some of the things that you've said, which is, are you getting the right people to join your mafia? And it's crucial. I've gone down the route of, we've hired some of the best people on the planet, and then we accidentally allowed some things to come in that weren't optimal. And I think every time you're going from 0 to 25, there's a set of people that are going to get you there. And then 25 to 50, there's another set of people, and then 100, and then 250 and 500. And it'll be interesting to hear your story when you're at 50 people, because it'll be a whole new evolution and a whole new set of expectations and systems and requirements than 100. And it's interesting going through those bottleneck growth, those growth curves.
Exactly. And if you think about that, the work output from people in the company follows a Pareto distribution. It's like, 80% of the work is going to be done by 20% of the people, or it's even worse actually than that. But okay, let's say 80-20, let's be generous here. If you are 25 people, it really makes a difference who you hire. And you know everybody by their first name. If you are 200 people, I think you have a different problem to optimize for. But yeah, I agree with you.
Well, because eventually, because like to your point right now, engineering might report, everyone in engineering and product might all report to one person, but then eventually as you scale and you grow, it becomes
Right.
a methodology of like, how do I create output through people? So as you scale and as you grow and you become a leader, it's now I have to have people that I can trust and I work through them, and they have to be able to coach, inspire, and to be able to live and breathe the company mission, values, and
Right.
again, make sure that the mafia is all aligned, right?
Yeah.
Like we all stand for the same thing, and
Yeah.
we
Yeah,
only
exactly.
take the same amount of shit in the right areas, but people know what we stand for, and that's how they survive.
Yeah, 100%. And it's really hard to hire like good A players. And the market is like, especially on machine learning and NLP and software engineering, it's very competitive. Like big companies, they have the money to pay. Like what is the salary now for a machine learning engineer? I mean, you can tell me it's probably more than I remember, but it's crazy.
What are the salaries that I've given? I mean, because I recruited at Facebook and Zillow and the Climate Corporation for those particular roles, but like the end of the and we've done a lot of startups, so I've probably worked with at least 60 different startups that have hired machine learning engineers,
Right.
the Wayfairs of the world, things like that, Shopify of the world. But I mean, you could look at it as like you could have a senior ML engineer make 100,000 plus equity, but then you could also have the same person making $1.3 million a year, depending on the organization, which is wild. And you go to the Bay Area 4 years ago, it was like a wormhole. Like it made no sense. I did so much recruiting in the Bay Area where you're just like, why? Like, how does that make any sense? But
Yeah. Yeah,
it's wild.
it's insane. So you have to convince somebody to come to your company, where if they're good and they're A players, they could go to any company and make probably like even more money. Like if they go to Meta, they can probably make more money than you would be able to pay them. But they have to believe in the vision. They have to believe in equity. They have to believe that
And
you're
I
going
think
to be
that's where it comes down to, right? Is like
right.
when out of the 100+ companies that we've hired engineering for is, and what we have to talk about to our team all the time is you can never sell compensation. Like it doesn't matter where you're at. You can be giving out $1 million at Facebook, and you could be giving out 100,000 plus. Honestly, there was I remember an acute experience where there was this one guy that believed in our company so much, and he would have been kind of head of data science for this company. He believed in the company so much. He's like, I actually want $0 in salary, but I want 4% of your company.
Wow.
And that was actually way more expensive than paying him 250,000
Right.
plus an equity component.
Right.
But he was like, I want no money. I want 4%, and we're going to the moon. Let's do that. And so it's interesting when you think about people's motivations, and it's just like you want somebody that looks at it and goes, I just want as much equity as possible. I want no actual front end cash. I want as much equity
Right.
as possible because I know that this thing's going to be the next and the greatest. How do I do that? And so it's always fun having those balances of like,
Exactly.
you want somebody in at a rate where it's like they can survive and they're not living off of ramen unless they choose to, but
Yeah.
because there are those people like they want to, but
Right.
it's like, how do we give them as much money as possible to just feel like they can live their life without being over encumbered by stress, but also see the future vision and be able to tackle
Exactly.
things long term, right?
Exactly. And the biggest tool that startups have and we have as well is equity. We're very stringent on equity. Like, and it's something that you probably don't know because you're from the US, you live in the US and Canada, but people in Greece at least, and maybe even Europe, they don't really know what equity means. Okay, so when we're like, hey, you're doing amazingly well, and we really want you for the long run, and we want to work together for like many years. Here's like, let's say, 0.2% stock options. They don't know what you're talking about. They're like, are you trying to scam me instead of giving me a raise? And we have to teach them that hey, dude, giving you like, let's say 10% raise is nothing compared to, giving you 0.2% of our company. You don't appreciate it now, but it's something that people here at least don't know about because they don't have they haven't seen it happen before. Whereas, you're in the Bay Area, you see like your cousin has had an exit, your aunt worked in wherever.
And that, and to be honest with you, like in a lot of ways, that becomes a cultural conversation when you have a very capitalistic like society that really just believes in that, like a free market type of scenario where somebody can pour in and build their own company and have large exits. Like in the US, that's such a common thing. Like, let's call that the American dream, right? So like the American dream is always like, how can I make it big in some way? And so that entrepreneurial mindset is instilled a little bit more than in other places where that doesn't exist.
Yeah, but I'm telling you, it's very funny. Whenever I talk to people in the US, they're like, I want equity. Okay, that's all I want. Like that's where the conversation starts from. Whenever I talk to people in Greece, the conversation like equity is not even mentioned in the conversation.
Yeah, versus like the US, it's like table stakes. Like
yeah. Exactly. Like I want equity, and then we'll discuss about money. Okay, it's okay. We'll figure it out with money. But like I want equity, and it makes a lot of sense to me. I would do the same, 100%.
Yep, same, 100%, 100%. Well, George, I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us, and I'm hoping someone out here was able to learn something from you, your journey. Again, I think it's awesome. Like taking a risk on yourself, and for me, was the most rewarding thing that I've ever done. But I'm also just like a terrible employee, and nobody should ever hire me. So there's that. But like, how can people get a hold of you? Because I know that you're hiring, and so I guess step one is what are you hiring for, and then step two is how can people get a hold of you?
Right. So we are hiring on machine NLP. Actually, we're hiring on UI UX design. We are hiring on sales. We are hiring on marketing. And why, if you're a good front end engineer, why not? Let's talk. They can people can get a hold of me either through LinkedIn. That's my name on LinkedIn, George Karagiannis. I'm pretty active there, so yeah, you can send me a message there.
Awesome. Well, George, again, really appreciate it. So check out George on LinkedIn. Check out the website, Mobio.AI, to learn more, and really appreciate it.
Yeah, it was a pleasure meeting you and talking to you. Same.
Nxt In.